Bible stories are not just ancient tales, they are sacred blueprints for understanding our deepest truths. Hidden within these biblical secrets is a revelation that has been right in front of us all along, yet often overlooked. What if I told you that there are not one, but two creation accounts in Genesis, each revealing something profound about who we are and who we are meant to become? In Genesis 1, we are told that God created humankind in his own image, male and female together, in a perfect harmony that reflects the divine. This creation is timeless, spiritual, and without flaw, a vision of humanity as divine beings, full of light, potential, and unity with God. But then Genesis 2 paints a different picture. Man is formed from the dust of the earth, and woman is created from his rib, each one with a purpose rooted in the physical world. Suddenly, creation becomes something more complex, full of roles, challenges, and earthly limitations. Now, imagine this. What if these two stories are not contradictions, but reflections of two sides of the same coin? Could it be that we, as God's creations, are both spiritual beings, capable of miraculous growth, and at the same time deeply grounded in this earthly existence with all its struggles? Jesus spoke of the dual nature of humanity, the spirit and the flesh, and perhaps this is the very message we are meant to understand from these two creation accounts. Think for a moment. Are you living from a place of spiritual clarity and divine connection, as in Genesis 1, or are you navigating the earthly struggles and limitations of Genesis 2? How does this duality shape your faith and your journey? Reflect on how these stories relate to your own path of healing and growth. I invite you to comment below. What does the duality of creation mean for you? Can you see both aspects of yourself within these ancient stories? Share your thoughts, your revelations, and let's explore these sacred Bible mysteries together. In the opening chapter of the Bible, we are introduced to a breathtaking moment, the creation of the heavens, the earth, and all living things, culminating in the creation of humanity. Genesis 1 offers a powerful image of creation, a harmonious, balanced act of divine will. God created man in his own image, it says. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Genesis chapter 1:27. This act of creation is significant not only for its directness, but also for the profound equality it suggests between man and woman, both created at the same time and both reflecting the divine image. From the very beginning, there is a message of unity and wholeness. The Bible tells us that God's creation was good, a complete, unified act that mirrored the divine nature of love, equality, and completeness. In this creation story, humanity is not the result of a random or chaotic process, but the deliberate and intentional act of a loving creator. Humanity is created with purpose, in God's image, reflecting the spiritual essence of the Creator. This narrative offers a picture of spiritual equality, where there is no distinction of rank or hierarchy between man and woman. Both are equal reflections of the divine. This speaks to the inherent dignity that every human being carries, regardless of gender, race, or background. This is the core of the Bible's message in Genesis 1. Humanity was made to mirror God's divine image, to walk in spiritual harmony with God and each other. Yet, as we reflect on this creation story, it also calls us to examine our lives. In our world today, where divisions and inequalities still persist, Genesis 1 offers a counter-narrative, a vision of humanity united in divine purpose. How often do we forget that we were created in God's image, in His likeness, with the same inherent worth and beauty? This truth should bring healing to the divisions we see in our societies. It calls us to recognize the dignity in every person, the divine spark within us all, But there's more. Genesis 1 teaches us that creation is not just physical, it is spiritual, rooted in love and unity. The act of God speaking creation into being, declaring everything good, reminds us that we, too, are part of something good, something holy. We are meant to live lives that reflect this goodness. In our daily lives, we can choose to see the divine image in ourselves and others. When we live in this awareness, we create a world of peace and healing, a world that mirrors the divine creation in Genesis chapter 1. Now, as we turn to Genesis 2, we encounter a shift in tone and perspective. Unlike the sweeping cosmic creation of Genesis 1, Genesis 2 zooms in on the more personal, intimate act of creation. In this account, God forms man from the dust of the earth and breathes life into him. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. Genesis chapter 2:7. This moment is profoundly intimate. Whereas Genesis 1 depicts the vast cosmic nature of creation, Genesis 2 shows God's deep personal involvement in humanity's creation. It speaks of a creator who is not distant or detached, but deeply engaged with his creation, shaping and breathing life into the very dust of the earth. In this act, humanity is given not only life, but purpose. God places the man in the Garden of Eden to tend it and care for it, and only when God observes that it is not good for man to be alone, does he create woman, taking a rib from the man and forming her from him. The relationship between Adam and Eve is one of mutual care, cooperation, and companionship. This creation story, with its more personal, grounded nature, reflects the human experience in a different light. While Genesis 1 shows us our divine spiritual nature, Genesis 2 reminds us of our earthly connection, our groundedness, and our need for relationship. We are not solitary beings, but we are created for companionship and community. Eve is created as a helper, not inferior or subordinate, but complementary, reflecting the idea that true partnership is built on mutual support and shared purpose. The symbolism here speaks to our need for relationships that nurture and sustain us, just as Adam and Eve were meant to nurture and care for the Garden of Eden. Our relationships, whether with family, friends, or God, are not merely optional. They are integral to our human identity. Genesis 2 calls us to reflect on how we live in relationship with others. Are we cultivating relationships that are mutually supportive and life-giving? Are we living in harmony, as Adam and Eve were meant to do in Eden? At the same time, Genesis 2 highlights our vulnerability. God creates man from the earth, a humble and fragile material. This is a reminder that we are not invincible. We are creatures made from dust, and yet we carry within us the breath of life, the divine spark. This balance between our earthly nature and our divine calling is what makes us truly human. As we consider the lessons of Genesis 2, we are reminded of the importance of care for our relationships, care for the world around us, and care for ourselves. Just as Adam was placed in the garden to tend it, we are placed in this world to care for it and for each other. This call to stewardship is a healing force in a world that often neglects the earth and each other. As we reflect on both creation accounts, we begin to see a more complete picture of humanity. We are both spiritual beings, made in God's image, and earthly beings, made from dust, yet given divine purpose. Both Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 offer profound insights into who we are and how we are meant to live. The unity and equality presented in Genesis 1 remind us of our divine worth, while the grounded, relational nature of Genesis 2 calls us to live in connection with others, caring for the world around us. Together, these two creation stories offer a path to healing, a way to reclaim the wholeness and balance we were always meant to have. We were created with a divine image, but we were also placed in this world to care for it, to nurture it, and to grow within it. In this balance lies our true calling. I invite you to reflect on these creation stories and how they speak to your own life. What part of you feels connected to the spiritual creation of Genesis 1, and what part of you resonates with the grounded, relational creation of Genesis 2? How can you live out both aspects of your humanity, spiritually and earthly? How can you bring balance, unity, and care into your relationships and your world, just as God intended from the very beginning? As you ponder these questions, consider the power of healing that lies in understanding who we truly are and what we are meant to do in this world. Share your thoughts with us, and let's explore together how we can embody both the spiritual and the earthly, and live out the divine image we were created to reflect. As we dive deeper into the two creation stories in Genesis, it becomes clear that they are not contradictory, but complementary. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 each offer a different perspective on humanity's origins, yet together they reveal a fuller picture of who we are and the divine purpose we are meant to fulfill. Genesis 1 shows us the grandeur of creation, our spiritual and divine origin, made in God's image, pure and untainted. But Genesis 2 brings us down to earth. It gives us the reality of our humanity, our earthly connection, our vulnerability, and our need for companionship and care. What if these differences are not a contradiction, but rather two sides of the same divine coin? Genesis 1 shows us the ideal, the perfect spiritual human, created directly from God's will. Genesis 2, on the other hand, shows us the journey, the process of becoming, of learning, and of living in the physical world. The spiritual creation of Genesis 1 is the unchanging truth of who we are, while the earthly creation of Genesis 2 is the ongoing story of how we live that truth out in a world that requires growth, struggle, and redemption. This duality between the spiritual and earthly aspects of humanity is one that resonates deeply with us today. We often feel torn between the higher calling of our spiritual nature and the demands of our earthly existence. How often do we find ourselves longing to live with the purity and wholeness of the creation in Genesis chapter 1, while simultaneously grappling with the limitations and struggles of life in this world, just as we see in Genesis 2. But it is in this tension that we find growth, transformation, and healing. The Bible offers us not just two creation accounts, but a vision for how we are meant to live as spiritual beings in a material world. The challenge, then, is not to reject one aspect of our nature for the other, but to embrace both fully. Just as Genesis 1 and 2 are both part of the creation story, so too are the spiritual and earthly parts of our being. When we live in harmony with both, we step into the fullness of our divine calling. This truth calls us to live with intention, to remember that we are both divine and human. Every day, we are invited to bring the image of God into our earthly lives. We are called to live out the spiritual purpose of our creation in the midst of life's challenges, to find God's image in every interaction, and to reflect divine love in every corner of our world. The healing that comes from understanding these two accounts is profound. It helps us accept the parts of ourselves that are broken, imperfect, and struggling, knowing that they do not diminish our inherent value as God's creation. In fact, our struggles are part of our journey toward becoming more fully who we were created to be. The earthly challenges we face are opportunities for growth, just as Adam and Eve had to tend to the garden and face the temptation of the serpent. It is a beautiful paradox. In our imperfections, we reflect the divine. In our struggles, we experience the journey of becoming whole. And in this journey, we are never alone. God's presence is with us every step of the way, guiding us through both the spiritual and earthly aspects of our existence. We are invited to live fully, not as one-dimensional beings, but as complex, multifaceted creations that reflect the divine light in all that we do. This is the beauty of the creation story. It offers us not just a glimpse into our origin, but also a roadmap for how to live fully in the world today. By embracing both our spiritual essence and our earthly experience, we unlock the fullness of our humanity. The more we understand this balance, the more we are able to heal, grow, and reflect the divine image in all our actions. When we explore deeper into the mystical traditions, such as Kabbalah, we begin to uncover even more layers to the Genesis creation story. Kabbalistic teachings offer us a view of creation that focuses on the duality of humanity in a deeply spiritual sense. In these traditions, the creation in Genesis 1 represents God's original, pure plan for humanity, the perfect, divine being created in God's image. The creation of Genesis 2, however, marks a shift. It represents the fall from that ideal plan as humanity descends into a more material, limited existence. This interpretation adds a layer of understanding to the creation story. It suggests that Genesis 1 is not just about the beginning of the physical world, but about the spiritual essence of humanity, untouched by the flaws of the world. Genesis 2, in contrast, speaks to the human condition we know so well, a life that is filled with challenges, limitations, and temptations. Yet, in the very moment of this descent into earthly existence, we are given the opportunity to grow, to evolve, and to reconnect with God through our experiences. The mystical traditions also introduce the idea that Eden was not merely a physical location, but a state of consciousness. In Genesis 1, when humanity was created, it was in the image of God, a state of perfect connection to the divine. But when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they fell from this perfect state, entering into the physical world, a world where they were bound by time, space, and suffering. But this fall is not the end. In fact, many mystical teachings suggest that it is through this earthly journey that humanity learns to reconnect with its spiritual origin. This is where the healing begins. By acknowledging our earthly struggles and limitations, we can begin to transcend them. We can find our way back to the divine essence that we were created from. This is the journey of spiritual awakening, the return to Eden, not as a physical place, but as a state of consciousness where we live fully aligned with God's image. In the Kabbalistic view, Genesis 2 is not a story of despair, but one of hope. It speaks to the process of transformation and redemption. Just as Adam and Eve were placed in the garden to tend it, we too are placed in this world to tend to our own spiritual growth. The earthly life we live, with all its challenges, is not separate from our divine purpose, but is, in fact, the very ground in which we plant the seeds of our spiritual development. Through our struggles, we are called to remember that we are God's image, even in our brokenness. The healing that comes from this understanding is profound. It helps us see our challenges in a new light, as opportunities for growth and transformation rather than obstacles to our happiness. It encourages us to embrace the process of becoming, knowing that, just like Adam and Eve, we too can be restored to the perfect image of God that we were created to reflect. This is the message of hope that Genesis offers, an invitation to grow, to evolve, and to reconnect with the divine purpose of our existence. The Kabbalistic view of Genesis enriches our understanding of creation, offering us a roadmap for spiritual growth. It teaches us that the path back to the divine is not always easy, but it is always possible. Through spiritual awakening, we can return to the original state of divine unity that Genesis 1 speaks of, a unity that transcends the earthly struggles of Genesis 2. This journey is one of healing, growth, and ultimate reconciliation with the divine. As we continue to explore these ancient stories, we are invited to reflect on our own journey. What part of you feels connected to the spiritual creation in Genesis chapter 1, and what part of you feels the pull of the earthly struggles in Genesis 2? How can you embrace both aspects of yourself and, in doing so, find healing and wholeness? The Bible offers us not just stories of the past, but a path forward, one that leads us back to the heart of God's image, where we are invited to live in full alignment with our divine essence. In the unfolding drama of Genesis, we come across a character whose story has been largely erased from the pages of mainstream biblical tradition, yet her presence echoes deeply in ancient texts. Lilith, the first woman created before Eve, is a figure that many are unaware of, but her narrative holds profound spiritual and emotional resonance for us today. The Bible, in its most commonly accepted form, does not mention Lilith by name, but her story has survived through other ancient sources, notably the alphabet of Ben Sira, a Jewish text from the Middle Ages that draws from older traditions. In this account, Lilith is portrayed as Adam's first wife, created at the same time and from the same earth as him. She was equal to him in every way, a partner made to walk beside him, not behind him. But Lilith, full of life, spirit, and independence, refused to submit to Adam, rejecting the hierarchical structure he tried to impose upon her. She was not made to be subjugated. She was created in the image of God, just as Adam was. This assertion of equality, however, led to her rebellion, and eventually, Lilith left Adam. This ancient myth, often hidden from view, has a profound significance that speaks to the core of human existence and the divine nature of all creation. Lilith, a woman created in the image of God, represents not just defiance, but an urge for freedom, independence, and equality. She embodies the divine spark in all of us that refuses to be silenced or diminished. But what happened to her? Why has her story been erased from most religious texts, and what does her narrative mean for us today? Lilith's departure from Eden represents more than just a rebellion against authority. It symbolizes the struggle for equality, the quest for dignity, and the courage to embrace one's full potential. Lilith's character challenges the traditional narrative that woman was created solely for man. She suggests that the divine image of women, just as it is for men, is not about submission, but about equal partnership in the divine order of creation. In modern times, Lilith's story resonates with women and men alike, particularly those who feel the weight of historical oppression or the struggle for equality. Her rejection of subjugation reminds us that we all have the right to stand as equals, to claim our identity as image bearers of God. In a world where women still fight for their voices to be heard and for their worth to be recognized, Lilith stands as a symbol of empowerment. She is the God-given strength that rises up to challenge systems that seek to silence or diminish us. Her refusal to bow to Adam's authority, though controversial in ancient times, offers us a powerful lesson today. Lilith's narrative also carries a deeply healing message for those who feel cast aside or forgotten. Just as she was exiled from the garden, there are moments in life when we may feel isolated, rejected, or misunderstood. But Lilith teaches us that rejection does not diminish our value. She was cast out, yet her essence, her strength, and her dignity remain eternal. In fact, her journey of exile led her to greater understanding, self-realization, and independence. The story of Lilith offers healing for all who have been marginalized, rejected, or erased from history. It reminds us that our worth is not defined by our acceptance in the world, but by our creation in the image of God. As we reflect on Lilith's story, we can begin to see how her narrative is a call to embrace both our divine nature and our independence. Lilith does not only represent rebellion, she represents the divine spark in all of us that knows our worth, that insists on being seen, and that demands to be treated with respect and dignity. She reminds us that we are God's creation, not made to be controlled, but to stand alongside others in mutual respect and love. Moreover, Lilith's story speaks to the importance of autonomy and personal agency in our spiritual journey. Just as she walked away from Adam, sometimes we too must leave behind the old, restrictive patterns of thinking, the old ways of relating to the world, in order to step into the fullness of our true calling. Lilith's story is not one of defeat, but one of liberation, a call to break free from what binds us and to live as God's image bearers, fully realized in our uniqueness and strength. The erasure of Lilith from mainstream religious texts may also reflect a deep fear of female power, an anxiety that stems from the desire to control, dominate, and diminish the feminine aspect of creation. But the Bible itself holds a powerful counter-message. Genesis chapter 1, where both man and woman are created equally in God's image, tells us that the divine nature is present in both the masculine and the feminine. Lilith, in her original form, embodies the feminine divine, strong, independent, and full of life. Her very existence challenges the assumptions about gender roles that have been deeply embedded in religious traditions. Today, Lilith can be a source of healing for those who feel they have been overlooked or oppressed, and her story is an invitation to embrace our wholeness. In a world where so many are silenced or made to feel less than, Lilith speaks to the divine call to stand firm, to rise in strength, and to claim our place in the world as equals with all people, especially in our relationship to the divine. Her tale also reflects the deep spiritual journey that each of us undergoes. Like Lilith, we are often forced to confront the limitations of the world, but this struggle is not the end of the story. The spiritual path, like Lilith's journey, is one of transformation. Her exile can be seen as a form of growth, a necessary separation that ultimately leads to deeper understanding, to self-realization, and to the reclamation of the divine image in her. We live in a world where Lilith's story still speaks loudly, not just for women, but for all people who feel marginalized or cast out. Her courage calls us to speak up for justice, to demand respect, and to never settle for a world where anyone is treated as less than divine. Lilith teaches us that to be human is to embody the image of God in all its fullness, and that no one, no matter how they are portrayed or misunderstood, should be forced to accept anything less. Lilith's narrative also reminds us of the importance of embracing both our earthly and spiritual natures. She is a symbol of the divine feminine, representing the sacred balance between strength, independence, and unity. Her story invites us to claim our own divine power, to find healing in the acceptance of who we are, and to recognize the divinity in everyone, regardless of gender or position. So, as we reflect on the forgotten first woman, Lilith, we are called not only to reclaim her story, but to live out the lessons she embodies. We are reminded that the divine is not about hierarchy, but about equality, partnership, and mutual respect. Lilith, in her defiance, offers us a path of healing, to rise up, claim our voice, and live fully in the image of God. She is not just a figure from ancient texts. She is a living, breathing reminder of the strength that lies within all of us. Her story, long silenced, now calls us to listen, to honor our own power, and to embrace the divine essence that is God's image within each of us. Lilith's journey may have been difficult, but it was hers, and it offers us the freedom to walk our own path with courage, love, and dignity. As we reflect on Lilith's narrative, may we find the strength to honor our own divine spark, to challenge the world's limitations, and to embrace the fullness of our spiritual and earthly selves. As we bring this exploration of the Genesis creation stories to a close, it's impossible not to feel a deep sense of awe and wonder at the truth that has been revealed. The Bible has so much to teach us, not just about the world and how it was created, but about ourselves. The stories of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not just ancient myths or historical accounts. They are blueprints for how we, as humans, are meant to live and grow in harmony with God's divine plan. When we think about the beauty of Genesis 1, where humanity is created in God's image, we are reminded of the divine spark within us. Each of us is a reflection of the Creator, and that truth should shape everything we do. It reminds us that we are spiritual beings, capable of great love, kindness, and compassion. Yet in Genesis 2, we are also shown our earthly nature, how we are connected to the earth, vulnerable and imperfect, but with the capacity to grow, evolve, and become better. This duality is what makes us human. It is what makes our journey on this earth so profound. We are not just bodies, and we are not just spirits. We are a blend of both, each needing the other in order to fully realize the divine purpose for our lives. The beauty of these creation stories is that they remind us of the healing journey that is at the heart of our existence. We are not defined by our struggles or our imperfections, but by the image of God that we carry within us. Even in the face of challenges, even when we falter and fall, we are always invited to return to that divine essence. We are invited to heal, to grow, and to embrace our true selves, knowing that we are loved beyond measure by the Creator who made us. This healing journey is not always easy. We are tested, challenged, and often misunderstood. But in every difficulty, there is an opportunity for growth and transformation. Just as Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden and given the responsibility to care for it, we too are entrusted with the world around us, our relationships, our communities, and our inner world. It is through these challenges that we learn who we truly are. It is in the struggle that we find our strength, and it is in the healing that we discover the depth of God's love for us. As we reflect on Lilith's story, we are reminded of the importance of standing in our own power, of knowing our worth, and of never compromising our divine essence. She is a figure of independence, strength, and resilience. Her story teaches us that we are meant to live fully, to embrace both our earthly and spiritual natures, and to honor the image of God within us. Just like Lilith, we too can reclaim our place in the world, standing strong in the truth of who we are, knowing that we are divinely created and loved. The Bible is full of hidden wisdom, waiting for us to uncover. It speaks to our deepest fears, our greatest hopes, and our most profound desires. The stories within it are not just ancient tales, but living truths that resonate with us today. These truths offer healing, transformation, and a path to greater understanding of who we are and what we are meant to do. They invite us to reflect, to heal, and to grow, and they remind us that, no matter what we face, we are never alone. If this video has touched your heart, if you've felt the light of these biblical truths shining through the darkness, I invite you to support this journey in any way that feels right to you. Your energy, your encouragement, and your presence here mean more than words can express. Every like, every comment, every share is a small piece of energy that helps to keep this message alive. If you believe that the message of God's love and healing should be shared with the world, consider leaving a comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts, your reflections, and your own experiences with the teachings we've discussed today. How have these creation stories impacted your life? How can you bring the divine balance of both spirit and earth into your own journey? Your voice matters, and your story is a powerful part of this collective journey. And if you feel moved by this message, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every subscription is an affirmation that these teachings are reaching the hearts of those who need them. It helps me continue to create and share content that reflects the deep love and wisdom found in the Bible, so that we can all walk this journey together. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this community. Your support, your presence, and your energy are the light that keeps this journey going. May God's love continue to guide you, to heal you, and to inspire you, as we all walk the path of spiritual awakening and growth. Together we are more than just individuals. We are a reflection of the divine, living out our purpose on this earth. Thank you for being a part of this beautiful journey,